10 mind-blowing things that happened this week. 121418. Keeping up with the news is hard. So hard, in fact, that we've decided to save you the hassle by rounding up the most significant, unusual, or just plain old mind-blowing stories each week. This week was the usual chaotic mess we've come to expect over the course of 2018. There was madness in Washington. Yet more instability in London. Riots in France. Oh, plus a whole load of violence unfolding in Brazil, Russia, and France, again. Par for the course for this freewheeling year. Well, let you be the judge of that. Number 1. Yellow Vest protests continued to rock France. By some measures, the Yellow Vests movement in France has to count as one of the most successful protests in modern history. Began in the wake of a fuel tax hike, they soon ballooned into an angry howl against the current government, against Emmanuel Macron, and against a near-decade of plummeting living standards. Finally, on Monday, Macron cracked. After refusing to back down on the fuel price hike, he not only axed it, but he also raised the minimum wage, slashed certain taxes, and undid recent changes to the pension system. Had he come storming out with this 3 weeks ago, he'd be right at the top of his game again, but he didn't. And now there's serious concern that his concessions may have been too little, too late. Many Yellow Vests have said they will continue to protest until real change comes, a likely euphemism for Macron resigning. Number 2. France also suffered another Islamist attack. Thankfully, 2018 has seen very few Islamist attacks on France, following the horrible heights of 2015 and 2016, when over 200 people were killed in around 18 months. Unfortunately, very few isn't a synonym for none at all. On Tuesday, a gunman shouting Allahu Akbar opened fire at the crowded Christmas market in Strasbourg on the German border. His attack killed 2 people, injured 12, and left another braindead. The shooter has been identified as Sharif Chekhat, a 29-year-old petty criminal who was on French terrorism watch lists. As with many of the attackers in Europe in recent years, Chekhat seems to have been radicalized in prison, a sign that something's clearly very rotten in the prison system. Chekhat was wounded in the attack, and on Thursday, he was killed during a police operation in Strasbourg. Number 3. A gunman brought chaos to a Brazil cathedral. Sticking with our unhappy theme of mass murder for a moment, this week also saw a gunman bring carnage to the Brazilian city of Campinas. 49-year-old systems analyst Euler Fernando Gandolfo walked into the local Catholic cathedral during midday mass. He took a seat among some elderly worshippers and briefly prayed before standing up and opening fire on the congregation. By the time he stopped, 4 people were dead. Number 4. Angela Merkel was finally replaced as leader of her party. Right now, we're living through the twilight of the Merkel era. Following last year's disappointing national elections and a string of poor performances in regional ballots, the Chancellor of Germany has been left limping toward a finish line it's not at all certain she'll cross. Last Friday, we got the first glimpse of what might come next. Following a hotly contested vote, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer (AKK for short) beat Friedrich Merz to become the new leader of Merkel's CDU party. Although Merkel stays on as Chancellor, her party is now done with her. Number 5. Theresa May survived a bruising no-confidence vote. It's curious that the big 3 leaders of the EU, Macron, Merkel, and May, are all watching their authority erode at precisely the same time. As Macron was battling a revolutionary street movement and Merkel was being shunted off stage into lame duck status, Theresa May was once again clinging desperately on as her party tried to throw her out the nearest window. This week's attempt came in the form of a vote of no confidence in her leadership, triggered by fellow Conservative MPs angry at her Brexit deal. The ballot was held in secret on Wednesday night. Had May failed, she would have been ejected as both party leader and prime minister, leaving Britain rudderless as the gigantic turd storm known as Brexit looms. Number 6. Russia's worst-ever serial killer was identified. It says something about 2018 that this was the year we identified the likely worst serial killers of 3 separate countries. In October, we learned that Niels Hogel had killed more than any other German serial killer in modern history, and in November, we learned that Texas felon Samuel Little may be the worst killer the U.S. has ever seen. Now, as we plod into December, it's Russia's turn. Mikhail Popkov was already known as a brutal murderer, having been jailed in 2015 for the killing of 22 women in his Siberian city of Angarsk. This week, a Russian court convicted him of 56 more murders. He is now likely the most prolific serial killer modern Russia has ever known. Number 7. Armenia's elections delivered massive change. Remember the Armenian Revolution earlier this year? This column spent around 5 weeks covering those crazy events, as one month's lone protest snowballed into a non-violent Velvet Revolution that toppled the entire government without a single shot fired. The lone protester who started it all, Nikol Pashinyan, became prime minister. But his story wasn't done yet. On the weekend, Armenians voted in a snap poll Pashinyan called after complaining that the current legislature was blocking his reforms. He was expected to win, but no one could have foreseen by how much. Pashinyan's alliance brought home over 70% of the vote. His closest rival pulled down under 9%. As for the former ruling party, his peaceful revolution dethroned. They didn't even scrape the 5% threshold for seats in the parliament. Number 8. China and Canada's diplomatic spat began to heat up. Earlier this month, Canada unexpectedly arrested Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of China's Huawei Telecoms company. The arrest was made at the request of U.S. authorities, who believe Wanzhou may have avoided U.S. sanctions on Iran and lied to American banks about it. In Beijing, the apparent clampdown on one of its top companies by America set alarm bells ringing. Although Wanzhou has not yet been extradited to the States, China is already piling on the diplomatic pressure. This week, that pressure got seriously ugly. In what appears to be tit-for-tat retaliation, China separately arrested 2 Canadians including a former diplomat. Number 9. The Charlottesville attacker was recommended for life in prison. It really says something about the sheer number of dum-dums out there in internet land that one of the top Google searches for Alex James Fields Jr., aka the attacker who killed a protester in Charlottesville, is Hillary Clinton supporter. Yep, that's right. The hate-filled white supremacist who murdered a leftist demonstrator is apparently the liberal here. Jesus wept. Thankfully, the knuckle-dragging imbeciles of the online world are apparently in the minority in America's court system. This week, the jury in Fields's case advised handing him life, plus 419 years, for the vehicle ramming attack that killed Heather Heyer. While the presiding judge will not issue a formal sentence until March next year, it seems likely that Fields will be going away for a long time. Number 10. Michael Cohen went to jail. Not so long ago, Michael Cohen was the right-hand man of the most powerful person on the planet. The longtime lawyer and fixer for President Trump was one of the biggest fish Robert Mueller's investigation landed. Now he becomes the first member of the president's inner circle to face jail time for his misdeeds. After prosecutors alleged he lied after a plea agreement had been made, Cohen was sentenced to 3 years in jail on Wednesday, to be served concurrently with a separate 12-month sentence for lying to Congress.